is our congressional panel where we're conversing with members of Congress. And so let me first introduce our moderator, who will then introduce each of the members participating. Congressman Joseph Simpolinski was born in Elmira, Chemung County. He served as a consultant, campaign manager, and staff for Representative Tom Reed. In 2022, Mr. Simpolinski was elected to the 117th Congress by special election to fill the vacancy caused by the resignation of Representative Tom Reed. He was not a candidate for re-election for the 118th Congress, and he currently serves as Chief of Staff for Assemblyman Joseph Giglio. So would you please welcome our moderator, Representative Joe Simpolinski.
Chairman, thank you so much, and it's a real pleasure to be here. And I'm glad that he gave that introduction, because I'm sure there's a lot of people going, I've never heard of that congressman before. Because you're looking at the person who served the 17th shortest term in the history of the Republic. But it was a real honor to serve the district that I was born in and raised in. It was an honor to be the nominee of the Conservative Party in that special election. So I want to thank the state chairman for his support. That doesn't happen without his support and the support of the entire executive committee. And it was a real honor to serve. And I took those 4 months very seriously, just like these gentlemen take their job very seriously. We were able to pass legislation affecting those in the disability community, and I took some votes I'm very proud of, standing up for religious freedom on the marriage vote. I voted against that. My last vote in Congress was against the omnibus, and so it was a very worthwhile activity. And the reason I think that Jason asked me to do this is because I can sympathize to some degree with what these four gentlemen are going through right now and the learning curve that they're going through and the opportunities that are before them. So I'll introduce each of them. I'll go in district number order. From the 1st District, Congressman Nick LaLota. He's the son and grandson of police officers, a Naval Academy graduate, naval officer, former member of the Amityville Village Board, former chief of staff to the Suffolk County Legislature, and is married with 3 daughters. So Congressman LaLota, thank you for being here. Next is the 17th District. This is somebody that I've known for probably about 14 years, give or take. When I was a campaign manager, he was working already in state politics in the 2010 cycle, and I got to know him then. Congressman Mike Lawler, former state assemblyman, former deputy town supervisor, former executive director of the New York State Republican Party, and he's married with 1 daughter who I believe is little, right? It's
9 months.
9 months, little one. So I have 2 toddlers myself, so I can sympathize with that as well as the professional side of things. So Congressman Lawler, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Next is the 19th District, somebody also I've known for a very long time, Congressman Molinaro, the former Dutchess County executive, a former state assemblyman as well, former mayor, former county legislator, and former nominee for governor of the state of New York of both the Republican and conservative parties, and someone who's married with 4 children. And I'm very proud that Mark took over 2 counties that I represented. He now represents Tioga County, which I represented most of, and he represents Tompkins County, which I represented all of. There are 32,000 people in the city of Ithaca. In the special election, I received 122 votes. That's right. You should clap for that, because if I was doing, 20, 30, 40%, I probably wouldn't be at the Conservative Party event. But Mark has taken over that chunk of the old 23rd District, and also, like myself, is a father of a child with special needs. And that's, it was, as I said, a focus of my proactive legislative agenda was that arena, and I know that that's where Marcus is at as well. So thank you, Congressman Molinaro, for being here. And in the 22nd District, Congressman Brandon Williams, also a former naval officer, so we have 2 of those up here on the panel, an entrepreneur, holds an MBA and has run an agribusiness in central New York, and is the founder of his own software company, so he knows what it's like to sign the front side of a paycheck as opposed to just the back side of a paycheck. And he's married with 2 children. He represents the Syracuse, Utica, Rome area. Congressman Williams, thank you for being here. So as was stated, you can text questions to 585-734-2199, and I think he ran off with the phone, so I'm going to need that. But I'm going to start with some questions of my own, and if we don't get the phone back, just raise your hand. One of the best things that happened to me in my time in the House was the committees that I served on. I was very privileged to serve on the Budget Committee and the Education and Labor Committee. And that really shaped what I was able to do for my constituents back home. And so I wanted to go down the row and see your commentary on the committees to which you've been assigned and what you think you can do for the state, country, and your district based on those committee assignments. So we'll just go right down the row, starting with Congressman Williams.
Sure. Before we start, I just want to, say thanks to Jerry Kassar, to Bernie Ment, Chris Kendall. These are the Conservative Party leaders in my district, and that's where I started, was with the Conservative Party, the very first people that I talked to about running for Congress. And so a year ago, I didn't know a single person in the Republican committees, and the Conservative Party's the folks that stood up for me early that gave me the momentum to win handily in the primary, and then to win in a Biden +7 district as a conservative. So thank you to everyone in this room, and particularly to those leaders. Very important to my race. In terms of committees, I'm on 3 committees. The first is Transportation and Infrastructure. In Syracuse, we have the Micron technology investment that'll be critical to the economics of Central New York. And we have the I-81 project. I'm also on Space Science and Technology. I'm the only, as far as I know, the only nuclear engineer in Congress, and so focusing on energy, be an opportunity there. And then lastly, in Education and Workforce, we have Syracuse University and several other schools in my district, and I'll be focusing on school choice, an advocate for school choice. Stephanie and I homeschooled our kids. So, Joe, hopefully that was consistent with the question you asked, but that's those are the committee assignments I'm on.
Awesome. Congressman Molinaro.
And I, too, want to thank all of you. Chairman Kassar, who was steadfastly supportive of the 2 races I got to run in 6 months. My wife was thrilled. I got to run 2 elections in less than 6 months. But to all of you as well, not only in the 11 counties I now represent in the 19th Congressional District, but to all of you for your support in 2018. Then Chairman Mike Long asked me when I decided that I wasn't going to run for governor of New York, he said these words: "Close the door, but don't lock it." And the door was not locked, and you all were very supportive of my candidacy in 2018. We did a lot of good. Everything we had to say about Andrew Cuomo turned out to be true. And rather than being on a beach on Long Island, the man should be in jail. But nevertheless, here we are these years later, and I'm honored now to represent the 19th Congressional District, be a part of the majority makers, the Republicans who flipped Democratic seats here in New York that gave the Republican majority in the House of Representatives. You made that happen, and you not only should take credit, but be very, very confident that you have sent a group of now members of Congress that not only understand where we came from, but work together, and I think that's fundamentally important, and you ought to be proud about that. I serve on the House Transportation Infrastructure Committee. I serve on the House Agriculture Committee and the House Small Business Committee. All 3 I wanted, asked for, lobbied for, worked for, and thankfully leadership provided me that opportunity, basically for the same reasons. I've spent the last 29 years in local government, you know this, in serving on transportation infrastructure, allow us to direct not only resources, but ensure that we're providing. I think I'm breaking all the damn microphones. Usually the mic goes out when I'm done speaking. That's it. I don't want to.
I got it for you, Congressman.
Thank you, Congressman. Jeez. I'm looking forward to the work on T&I. We obviously are going to be the committee that's going to ensure the appropriate oversight, and as this administration intends to direct trillions of dollars in transportation and infrastructure funding that was approved before us. Now, would we have approved it as it was? Likely not. But now it's our responsibility to ensure every dollar gets spent efficiently and effectively, and if it doesn't, it shouldn't be spent at all. We also want to be sure, of course, that those dollars get to districts like ours, not just those very blue places that President Biden probably paid more attention to. We know in New York that small businesses and farms continue to struggle. Serving on the Ag Committee this year will be focused on the reauthorization of the Farm Bill. Very important to ensure New York farms, upstate farms, have the support and the resources that they need. And of course, small businesses remain the backbone of our economy, struggle hard every day, and providing both the tax and regulatory relief that they need, you need, in order to thrive is important. So looking forward to the work. I will say up until last week, it didn't feel like we were doing much work. But last week, thankfully, committees started functioning. We're advocating for you, arguing for you, and we're appropriately irritating, agitating, and frustrating the Biden administration.
So I, too, would like to join in my colleagues' comments in thanking Chairman Kassar and his team for support. And I come from Suffolk County. My district is wholly contained in Suffolk County. And Mike Torres, my chairman over there, has a hell of a team with him as well. And 6 days from today will be the one-year anniversary of Mike calling me on February 11th of this year, asking me if I wanted to get into the race in New York 1. It was a time before and I think John Fasso's in the room too, it was a time before the districts were redistricted. And it was a tougher district. I think it was a district that Biden won maybe by 5 or 6 points, maybe even worse. And there weren't too many of us who wanted to say, hey, yeah, I'll go do that. But Mike knew I had some fire in the belly and figured that I might be a little naive enough to say yes, and nonetheless asked me the question if I would run. And I passed it by my wife, of course, and my 3 kids, and soon thereafter the answer was yes. And that was a fun part of the story. But the better part of the story is after Faso and his folks got done with their work and made districts in New York more competitive for folks with our ideology, Mike and some other folks stuck with me when some other folks might have wanted to jump into the race at that point in time and do the easier thing and win a district that Biden only won by a couple hundred votes. That team of folks around Mike stuck with me, so I appreciate that dearly. Marcus alluded to this as well. There are 12 Biden districts that House Republicans won throughout the country this year, 12. 6 of them exist here in New York. We all were able to persevere and climb uphill because we had help from folks like you in the room, whether it was knocking on doors, making phone calls, giving money, rallying everybody in between. We had a solid amount of wind in our sails, and of course Lee Zeldin on the top of the ticket and all the oomph that went behind him benefited us down ballot. But there were a heck of a lot of reasons, and maybe that's going to be a question later on, so I don't want to filibuster this too much, but that was a heck of a lot of reason that we all are on this stage right now. 4 of the 6 are up here right now. Anthony Desposito, my colleague from Long Island, is doing a heck of a job as well. I'll pass on number 6 for now. But nevertheless, we, along with Nick Langworthy, our other freshman colleague, are making a heck of a freshman team in the House, and we've been working together for our now first month in the Congress, and leadership is taking us very seriously. When they're not seeing Mike on all the major networks, they get to talk to us as well about things that are important to us, the state, our districts, our ideology, and you should be confident that we, on our committees and as a group, are going to be a fighting force for good here in New York. And to the question with respect to my committees, very honored to have been selected to be on the Armed Services Committee. Served 11 years in a Navy uniform, and I intend to help bring that knowledge to the Armed Services Committee to ensure that we have policies and budgets and leadership within DOD necessary for our men and women in uniform to go win the next conflict that they're in and come home safely. That, if there was a mission statement, I think, for the House Armed Services Committee, that I think should be the mission statement. That's what I'm certainly most focused on, given this role in my experience. I also am honored to serve on the Homeland Security Committee and the Small Business Committee. Homeland, it was created post 9/11 because of what happened on 9/11. I think that I ought to be focused on 2 major things: ensuring there's not another terrorist attack onto New York, and we have to secure that damn border already. It is the job of the Homeland Security Department to do it. Secretary Mayorkas is failing miserably every day at that job, and we're going to have a heck of a lot of hearings dragging him in under oath to ensure that we get the answers that the American public deserves so we can secure the border and stop the illegal flow of people, weapons, and drugs across that border every day. We had our first committee meeting for that committee just recently, and a West Point grad. I had to, swallow that when I understood a West Point grad was going to be the chairman of that committee. But nevertheless, is a heck of a leader and has us willing to fight on these very important issues to make sure that we deliver on our campaign promises of securing that border. Finally, on the Small Business Committee, Mark kind of hit it already. There are a lot of dollars flowing through the federal system. Some of it we think is a good idea, some of it we think is a terrible idea. To the extent that that legislation has passed already and that money is going to flow, New Yorkers should get their fair share of that money. For every dollar we send to Washington, we get a mere 93 cents back. That's the 5th worst return on investment of any state in the union. Making sure that when there are federal dollars to be sent to the states, making sure that we get our fair share will be a big priority of mine in the Small Business Committee.
And just before we hand it over to Mr. Lawler, I would ask all the panelists to emulate Congressman Lilloda, because I'm told that if you hold the mic in the middle, you don't cover the antenna. That was the issue. So, Congressman Lawler.
Well, it's great to be here with all of you, and I want to start by thanking Chairman Kassar, who's been a longtime friend, an ally, and he's done a masterful job leading the Conservative Party since taking over. And the reality is that if not for the Conservative Party, we would not be here right now, because the 3 ballot initiatives that the Conservative Party waged war against 2 years ago and defeated with the support of Ron Lauder, that set the stage and put us in a position for John Faso and Ed Cox and Tom Dunham and others to bring the lawsuit against New York's maps. And so the Conservative Party was integral to all that. I want to thank Chairman Kassar and the Conservative Party for all of your help and support, and really for delivering the majority for the Republicans nationwide. So thank you to Chairman Kassar. And I want to thank Sam Namath, Rockland County Chair, Don Menachino, Dutchess County Chair. I didn't see Jimmy Maxwell or Hugh Fox, but my four county chairs have all been very supportive, and Sam has been an integral part of my team since I ran for Assembly 2 years ago. So I want to thank them for their hard work. Look, it's been said by my colleagues here. The Conservative Party played a pivotal role in this election. It was the margin of victory for me in my race. It was the margin of victory for me 2 years ago when I ran for the State Assembly. And I'm proud to run on the Conservative Party banner. New York was the key to the majority. We're the difference between a Speaker, Hakeem Jeffries, and a Speaker, Kevin McCarthy. And it is obviously a big difference between the two. And so New York is going to be pivotal for 2024 and making sure that we hold on to this Republican majority. The Democrats are embarrassed by what happened, and they are gunning for all of us on this stage and Anthony D'Esposito, and they're going to do everything they can to defeat us. So the Conservative Party is going to once again be pivotal in all that we do in 2024. I want to say, with respect to the committees that I got, I'm on House Financial Services and House Foreign Affairs. Financial Services obviously is critical to New York. In my district, there's about 30,000 financial service sector employees that live in it. So it is certainly going to be important that we have a voice on that committee. Andrew Garbarino from Long Island is also on that committee with me, and both of us are on the cap markets and housing and insurance subcommittees. So we will have a big voice in the process. And secondarily, House Foreign Affairs. Two of my predecessors, one a Republican, one a Democrat, Ben Gilman and Elliot Engel, both served as chair of that committee, so my district has long had strong representation on the Foreign Affairs Committee. I have one of the largest Jewish communities living within my district, and so it's important to have a voice in that process as well. As many of you know, my wife is from Moldova, about 30 miles from the Ukraine border. Her family still lives there near Transnistria, which is Russian occupied, so I certainly have a personal interest in what is going on in Ukraine and China, as we saw with the China spy balloon that just flew over our country for the last week. China is our greatest geopolitical threat. We need to take it seriously, and the Foreign Affairs Committee is going to provide a lot of oversight with respect to China. We have a select committee on China that was also created that falls under the Foreign Affairs Committee, and so we're going to be doing a lot of work focused on China and the relationship between the United States and China and the Chinese Communist Party in the work that they are doing both economically, militarily, as a competitor to the United States. So a lot to talk about, but appreciate the opportunity to be here, and just once again, thank you all for your support.
All right. So our first question from the audience is directed at Congressman Lalota, I think in light of your committee assignment. And as a military man, what is your assessment of our current military's readiness, especially in light of what Congressman Lawler just referred to, the balloon situation?
So I'm bullish on the readiness of our military men and women. I do believe that they are the strongest fighting force our world has ever known. It's a strong force for good. They're adequately trained and equipped on most fronts, but they're not much if there's not good leadership. And I think that's what we saw lacking in the last couple of days. I haven't gotten a formal briefing or a classified briefing on this yet, but from what we're able to view via open source, it's been quite clear that a intelligence gathering aerial vehicle, and we shouldn't joke around that it's just a balloon. This is likely a highly sophisticated piece of technology that is likely able to intercept communications, take pictures, and relay them back in real time back to the Chinese Communist Party. I am worried as hell that a lot of that happened over our lands, not only just pictures of our military sites, of maybe nuclear power sites, but also collecting of communications that were coming from Americans and maybe would be bound for satellites were grabbed by this aerial vehicle. And I think that, from what I've read only on an unclassified environment right now, that there was an opportunity for us to engage this aerial vehicle, and we could have been done in Western waters, Western territorial waters. We had the legal right to do something when it was in the Western Pacific, when it was certainly over unpopulated parts of Alaska or Montana or elsewhere, where there wasn't any civilian harm at stake. And my initial reaction to that, which I hope to be informed more on in the next couple of days during some HASC committee hearings, is that who actually made the decision not to do something over a Chinese Communist Party asset flying across our land, and to what extent were levels of the chain of command not notified or not notified? Having been a military man who's sat in an aircraft carrier 12 miles outside of Korea and China, we have prepared as a military. I'm talking my knowledge from back in 2003, 4, and 5, which is more advanced now. We have pre-planned responses for things like this. When an unknown thing comes in this sort of range, we do that, and we study towards those pre-planned responses. I'd like to know, when we have witnesses under oath in a committee, who knew this was there, who they relayed that information to. Did they make an affirmative decision not to relay that to somebody? Because I think that this Republican Congress campaigned on the theory of accountability, that we knew that there was going to be a Democrat in the White House when we hopefully took the majority. And we told the American people we would hold the administration accountable when it veered off of course. And I think this is a prime example of that, because regular folks like us are really concerned that a severe adversary of ours has the upper hand.
The next question I'm going to direct to Congressman Williams based on his background. And the question is, with the success or preliminary success of fusion, might nuclear energy be making a comeback, and or what are your priorities for energy production, independence, and security?
Yeah, thank you. I'll try to make this brief. So I have thousands of hours supervising the operation of a nuclear power plant, and I'm the first nuclear submarine veteran to serve in Congress in 50 years. The fusion question, we had an amazing breakthrough. We should all celebrate that. Net positive energy in terms of the lasers that we put in at the fuel, and once we ignited the fuel, the fusion reaction, the energy that we got out. So that's a major accomplishment. Fusion has 4 primary challenges. Number 1 is fuel. Number 2 is ignition. That's the one that we just celebrated. Number 3 is containment, because you're basically containing a little piece of the sun. It's pretty hot. Most metals, no metals will survive that. And then last, how do you convert that into usable electricity? Those are 4 very major technical hurdles. We've had an advancement of one. The Biden administration is trying to use this to say, oh, we're going to meet our green energy goals in 10 years using fusion. I just heard a briefing on this. That's crazy, and it's part of the green agenda to move us off fossil fuels. So we should all celebrate fusion, continue to invest in it. Maybe in the next century, we will have fusion energy. Regarding fission, which you may know is been around for a long time, the physics, engineering, and science and practice of nuclear power as we know it from fission is extremely well understood. There's a lot of new reactor designs that are ready to be brought on. We just have to have the will and the regulatory framework to do that. And I believe that we're entering into a new era of nuclear power, which is clean and reliable and resilient and responsible. So I will be an advocate for that. And the last thing I'd say is that the Green New Deal policies of the Democrats are transferring a lot of wealth to China. They are driving up energy costs for the working class, for all of us, but it's particularly acute for the 63% of Americans that live paycheck to paycheck. It's unfair. It's not right. It's an ideological tax on working Americans, and we need American oil from American soil, and we need it right now, and I will always be an advocate for that.
All right. I'll remind you the number to text to Jason's lovely phone here is 585-734-2199. Any questions you have? The next question I'm going to direct to maybe the agriculture side of it, to Congressman Molinaro, and the foreign and financial side of it to Congressman Lawler. Can we initiate legislation to eliminate communist Chinese investment in American schools and farmland?
Well, the short answer is yes. The longer answer is yes, we should. The longer answer is yes, we must. I think we all have signed on to a piece of legislation that would accomplish that. Listen, the president celebrates, and many bipartisan, with bipartisan support, celebrates the CHIPS Act, this concept that we were going to invest in and then bring certain technology, chip manufacturing technology, high-tech jobs back to America, and that's important. Within the next 9 months, Congress will debate and we hope adopt the Farm Bill. Not as sexy, but American farming and agriculture is not only food security, it is national security. And if we don't treat the Farm Bill like we treated the CHIPS Act, we will be at not only a competitive disadvantage, but we are threatening our very way of life. And the fact that we would even entertain for a moment the Chinese Communist Party or any subsidiary thereof to purchase American farmland, in particular American farmland next to sensitive American assets, is not only asinine, it is dangerous. And we absolutely need to take steps to prevent that from occurring. Only 10 years ago, America produced enough food to feed ourselves. We no longer do that. And we as a nation better take very seriously not only the pressure from foreign nations to gobble up, buy up, and take advantage of American farmland and active soils, but we've seen it in our own state and otherwise. High taxes, high regulation, the high pressure is forcing small and medium-sized businesses out of the Northeast, farmers out of the Northeast. And what that is doing is making it nearly impossible for us to produce the kind of food product that we need to survive. That is dangerous. It is as dangerous as any other assault on America, and it needs to be treated as such.
So to totally agree with everything Marcus just said, there was broad bipartisan support, both for the creation of the Select Committee on China, as well as banning the president from selling our strategic petroleum reserves to China. And the reason I think there's broad bipartisan support is because most members, not part of the squad, recognize that China is a serious adversary and a threat, economically, politically, militarily, and that we need to treat them as such. And so the two committees that I'm on, especially, are going to have a lot of oversight over this, from the financial services side of things. Any sanctions that come forward will come through that committee, but also obviously in terms of our economy and making sure that the United States remains the preeminent economy in the world. A lot of the work that we do within that committee is going to be focused on that. With respect to foreign affairs, obviously, as I mentioned, the Select Committee on China falls under that, but we're going to be having hearings and markup on legislation very quickly, the end of the month, on China. So we are going to be moving. Kevin McCarthy has made it very clear that this is one of his top priorities as Speaker, to really examine the relationship between the United States and China, and to aggressively pursue legislation that will keep America in this strategic lead, if you will, in that competition. And so I think there is a lot that we're going to be doing, a lot focused on, as Marcus alluded to, within the Farm Bill. There's legislation that we're going to be pushing for, but it's just common sense, right? You can't have the Chinese Communist Party buying American land, certainly not next to strategic military sites. You can't have the Chinese Communist Party having these, police stations in the United States, rounding up people and bringing them back home to China. It's a very peculiar situation that's going on right now, and the Biden administration needs to very quickly get serious about it. Not letting the American people know about the spy balloon because you were worried about Secretary Blinken's trip to China, but when it became untenable to not let people know, then we had to deal with it, is ridiculous. This balloon should have been shot down in the Pacific, or at least in concert with Canada, as it was crossing over into territory. And the fact that it was allowed to meander through the United States for days is patently absurd. And so I spoke to Chairman McCall on my way up here. We're going to be getting a classified briefing on this, so hopefully, we'll have more information to fully understand all of it. But it is a serious crisis that we're dealing with China, and we need to get serious about taking them on.
So I'll direct this to each member of the panel. One of the big advantages of the fact that we've taken the majority in the House is the oversight function that committees have. And the question that's asked from the audience is, how does Congress deal with subpoenas which the Department of Justice or the FBI or the two agencies they refer to ignore? But I would use that question as an opportunity to open the door, because each and every one of you is going to have to engage in oversight in your committees of jurisdiction. So how do you what is your strategy for dealing with Biden administration that may be stonewalling the oversight that you're doing, and what's your goals for oversight for the 118th Congress? And we'll go right down the row.
I'm going to defer to my colleagues here and something to add at the end.
All right.
So I think that the ultimate power of the Congress is the power of the purse. And when the executive does not cooperate and want to exist in a world where our republic is governed by 3 co-equal branches, the leverage card that we're supposed to play is the power of the purse, and we will defund the bureaucrats who don't respond to our properly served subpoenas. I think that's the way that we handle that.
My turn? Yeah, what he said. Listen, no, and I'll say this very seriously. I think we all obviously are out in the community. We all read the things people say. There is a lack of appreciation and understanding for the constitutional role of Congress as it relates to the executive branch, and that is irrespective of who is in the executive branch. Our function is not only to obviously effectuate the Constitution and ensure the adoption of law and policy that effectuates the Constitution. It is, by definition, we are meant to provide the appropriate check, balance, and oversight of the executive branch. That is the function. It shouldn't be politicized, and it shouldn't be weaponized, as we did see one party rule in Washington do, but it must be exercised. And that means whether it is subpoenas and the act of defunding, or simply using the power of the purse and the power of our constitutional authority to hold the administration accountable when those moments arise, we have an obligation to do it. And beyond that, our government functions best when we are adversaries at times, branches between branches. That is good for us. It is healthy for us. It is necessary for us. Now remember, the Democrats' single-party rule appropriated some $5 trillion of your money. No one else's. I love this when people say the federal government's money. Your money, $5 trillion of your money. Government doesn't exist without taking your money out of your pockets and then, in theory, putting it towards something we think is for the greater good. $5 trillion over 2 years. That is now going to be appropriated and spent. It is our fundamental responsibility, and it's what we campaigned on, to ensure that those dollars are either not wasted, not spent if there's not an appropriate outcome, or that every dollar is accounted for. That is our fundamental constitutional responsibility, and on that we will exercise every ounce of our authority on your behalf.
So, to Marcus's point, all of us were elected for 2 main purposes. Number 1, to ensure that Nancy Pelosi was no longer Speaker of the House. And number 2, to serve as a check and balance on the Biden agenda. For the last 2 years, the Biden administration and Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi rammed through every crazy idea that progressive Democrats have had for decades. And they increased spending to record levels. And there was no oversight. There was no oversight performed by the Democratic majority. And in each of our committees, there is an oversight function. For instance, in my committee, we're going to be dragging the chair of the SEC before us quite frequently because the SEC has been out of control with the regulations that they have been putting in place. But there's obviously the Oversight Committee, there's the Judiciary Committee. They're going to be moving forward with many investigations. But Foreign Affairs, we're going to be looking at the withdrawal in Afghanistan and the disaster that was. Obviously, there's going to be the Select Committee on the weaponization of the Department of Justice. That's going to be moving forward. You're also going to have committees looking at the origins of COVID. And I see Bobby Ann Cox here, who I worked with to sue Governor Hochul over her, COVID camps, where they basically were looking to pass a regulation to remove people from their homes and put them in a quarantine forcefully. That type of conduct, whether it's at the state level or the federal level, is unacceptable. And so we are going to be moving forward with a lot of oversight in a lot of different areas. And certainly, if they do not comply with the subpoenas, then, as Nick said, obviously the power of the purse is one avenue. The courts are another avenue, though sometimes that takes longer to pursue. And then, of course, the press. And being public with the facing and letting the American people know what is going on. And I think there's lots of avenues when you are in the majority to apply pressure. But we are the only check and balance. Think about this, living in New York. As of last year, Democrats controlled everything in Washington, Albany, and New York City for the first time in our nation's history. There are no checks and balance in Albany. The governor just proposed increasing spending again by $7 billion, money we don't have. So we in the House Republican majority, as pertains to New York, as pertains to Washington, we're the only check and balance. And it's critical that we maintain that check and balance going forward, and we're going to do everything in our disposal to do that.
Just a quick comment about the competence. You know, oversight, that is our job to provide. One of the things that's gone unchecked is really the competence of our government. You know, does anybody think the FAA is operating effectively? And they are not. So there's a lot of these, you know, there are a few of these investigations that are going to be very emotional. Sometimes I call them grievance types things. Not that they're not important, but they're really fueled by a lot of the partisan politics and grievance. I personally, you know, I tell people I was in the chain of command for the release of nuclear weapons. I'm not that excitable a guy, nor would you want me to be in that role. And so, you know, I tend to care a lot more about the competence of our government and are they, you know, accomplishing the job that we've tasked them to do. And so with my background, you know, I hope to bring that kind of eye to the things that we're doing, and that's what you should expect to see from me.
So we have time. Yep. We have time for one wrap-up question. So we're here as guests of the Conservative Party, and so I thought a good wrap-up question would be from each one of you, what does it mean to you to be a conservative? So you can go down the row if you like.
It means I'm a member of Congress, because without you I wouldn't be. Like I said, the very first call that I made was to the Conservative Party in my area, and that I didn't know a single member of the Republican committees in my district when Steffi and I decided to run just a little over a year ago. And so it really did begin, you know, with this room and this organization. The reason I ran is that the American people feel powerless. If you think about that, in our system of government, we should not feel powerless. The government's power is derived from the people, but somehow it's upside down. So we're talking limited government, fiscal responsibility, a strong military, personal responsibility, all the things you read in, you know, The Road to Serfdom or you know, Milton Friedman or any of these classic texts. And we do live in a more populous moment. I think that's important as well. But America has enormous problems. This is a secret. We need better leaders. Don't tell anybody. And the answer to those problems are classical conservative answers. And I'm here to do that.
Mr. Molinaro.
I said this about 2 weeks ago. Some of you from my district were at my swearing-in ceremony. I have, although not the most popular thing to say among conservatives, I have taken an oath of office on 19 separate occasions since the day I turned 18 years of age. The one thing that will never diminish for me is that I have to raise my right hand. Generally, I have my left hand on a Bible, fundamentally important to me, and swear to uphold, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. That's what it means to be a conservative. As the Constitution was written, it is the most brilliant document to govern a people ever written in the history of mankind. And that we are fundamentally responsible as the government created by that Constitution to uphold, protect, and defend the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Some of you remember my predecessor, three times removed, Chris Gibson, who I admire, and of course I greatly admire John Faso, who served in this district as well. But Chris would tell you, as I like to remind us, the founders, when they used the term pursuit of happiness, it wasn't a state of emotion. We today, with Twitter and social media and everything else, we think of happiness only as, I'm happy, I'm feeling good today. I go to Mary Marinatter's pizza shop, I get a good pizza, I feel happy. My kids, they get an A, I feel happy. That's not what the founders, nor was the term at the time, that's not what it meant. At the time, pursuit of happiness meant to live a fulfilled life. The ability to achieve for ourselves through a recognition that we have an inherent right of liberty to achieve a fullness of life. Think of what Brandon said. We've established governments and layers of governments, most of which are incompetent at best, inefficient, wasteful, and corrupt at worst, that have in many ways made it more difficult for individuals through their own inherent right of liberty, right? We inherently have this within us. We've been unable to achieve that pursuit of happiness because government has gotten in the way. And so fundamentally, I come to this job and the role as, I guess, what you would call a traditional conservative, the belief that governments should do the things that people can't and wouldn't individually do, protect, secure, preserve us. But that government ought to ensure that we are able to achieve that pursuit of happiness. The ability to achieve for ourselves, and I hope by extension our children, every life has value for our children, the ability to achieve their happiness. And that we as elected officials shouldn't stand in the way, but rather ensure that we have that which is minimally necessary to uphold your ability to achieve that pursuit of happiness, that fulfillment of life. And that to me is what I think not only the job is, I think it's what the oath is about, and it is fundamental to what I think we as traditional conservatives have celebrated and feel. I'm going to take liberty and just offer this last comment, a little bit off the question, and then I'll stop. We all referenced, Mike especially, I think put an exclamation mark on it. These districts are the ones they're coming for. Make no question about it. Don't blink for a moment. We are all celebrating. In fact, this is the most folks I've seen at a CPAC evening in a very long time, and you're all here because we did some really phenomenal work. Thank you, Lee Zeldin. Thank you, John Faso and the team that argued the gerrymandering and the lack of constitutionality there. But if you take your foot off the accelerator, we will be in the minority, and we will have single-party rule yet again. They are coming for these districts. We need a bit of latitude to navigate. We all come to this understanding our districts better than anyone else, so bear with us as we try to navigate and represent the best of us and our districts well. But they're looking for us to make mistakes. We have to play perfect ball, perfect. It's why we do get frustrated by some of our colleagues, or at least a colleague who thinks that honesty isn't fundamentally important in public service. It's why we have to combat in our districts every day. We may not be in the places you want us to be because we've got to be on the ground working it. It's why at times we're going to probably link arms and maybe make some unpopular choices because we think it's necessary to hold on to these seats for your purposes, the ability to represent our interests well. We need you to be there with us because these next 2 years, it's only going to get progressively more challenging for those of us in these seats. But if we do our jobs well, if we hold firm to that oath, uphold, protect, and defend the Constitution as defined, help people achieve that pursuit of happiness, I am confident with your help we will hold on to these seats and even expand our majority if you stand with us over these next 2 years. So God bless you, and thanks for including us.
Representative Lalota.
I am absolutely certain from the bottom of my heart that we live in the greatest nation the world has ever known. For 246 years, we provided more freedom and more opportunity to more people, both within our borders and beyond, than any other nation in this world's history. Yet I am concerned. I am concerned about a 125% debt to GDP ratio. I'm concerned about a $31 trillion debt, a $1 trillion deficit, and weak international policies that will erode at the very thing that has made us so great in the first place. It's a reason why I was called to serve my country in uniform. It's a reason why I said yes to Mike Torres' phone call about a year ago. I believe that we here on this stage and you folks have an obligation to ensure this country's next 246 years are as damn good as our current ones. And our conservative policies are the ones that will make it that way. Sometimes you have to say no as a government. Wouldn't it be great if we can give free college and free checks every week and free stuff to everybody? There's no more money to do it. The money's drying up in the country, in the state, and many of our counties. And those of us on the stage and those of us who have been in the Republican and conservative movement for as long as most of us have been, understand that we have to say no sometimes. It's not because we're not compassionate people. We understand that people want to come to this country to enjoy the blessings that we've enjoyed so much with ourselves and our families. But sometimes you have to say no in order to preserve the thing that made you great in the first place. That's why I closely align myself with the ideals that you align yourselves with, and I'll give the same plea that Mark has tried to give. These things are not easy. It's tough saying no. It's much easier to say, hey, I got you $1 million, $1 billion, $1 trillion, or whatever else, and the check has come, and isn't life great? It's harder to take the responsible move that's going to be good for our children and grandchildren. We are taking that tougher road every day. We're taking it with your support. And like Marcus said, please continue to give us that support so we can pave the path for America's future just as bright as we have right now. Thanks.
And to close, Representative Lawler.
So Ronald Reagan once said, I believe that man is good, that what is right will always eventually triumph, and that there is purpose and worth to each and every life. And I think fundamentally that is what conservatism is about. And I think the respect for our Constitution, the respect for the rule of law, the respect for life, the understanding that we are all endowed by our Creator, that there are certain unalienable rights. That is what it means to be conservative. Certainly what it doesn't mean to be conservative is to be like AOC, Rashida Tlaib, and the squad. But I think the objective here in New York and across the country is to get us back on a fundamental path where we are respecting the law, where criminals are held accountable, where law enforcement is supported, where we respect life, where we respect the right of individuals to exercise their constitutional freedoms. That is fundamentally why all of us ran. That is why we are, working as hard as we are down in Washington. Because what has happened in our country, where parents are called domestic terrorists because they dare to ask a question, that's wrong. We can agree, we can disagree, we can think certain policies are good or bad, but fundamentally, a parent has a right to have a say in their child's education. And it's issues like that where we're just so off course. And we're very divided right now. I don't think it's as bad as other points in our history, frankly. when you think about the Civil War. But we need to get back to a fundamental place of acceptance and understanding and a free exchange of ideas. And we can debate those ideas, we can fight them out. I'm sure in this room alone, there's differences of opinion on certain issues. That's a good thing, it's not a bad thing. We need to get back to a fundamental place where we can agree to disagree, but be focused on what is in the best interest of our country as a whole. And try to be united. You don't have to love each other in the sense of, hey, let's go out to dinner, but you got to deal with each other. And I think that's something that has often been missing in recent years in government, for sure. And so being a conservative, I think, is espousing certainly conservative ideas and principles and a respect for our Constitution. But it's getting into the free exchange of ideas and debate and respecting our differences, embracing our differences. Fight it out. That's okay. That's why we have elections. But I think we need to get our country back on a path towards peace, towards prosperity, and towards freedom. And that's what I will continue to fight for.
All right. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all four representatives for being here. I had the pleasure of interacting with all of them as they were going through their orientation process and to different amounts and different places and different stages of that. And I was impressed by all four of them as I was finishing my term and they were taking over. Their serious of purpose and their energy and their respect for the people, the respect for the people that put them there. It's a profound honor to be in Congress, whether you're there a short time or a long time. Hopefully they're all there a long time. But I know that we're all unified in saying thank you to the Conservative Party, thank you to the people that put each and every one of us in a position to do some good. And I know that we're all excited for what these majority makers are going to do with that majority over the next 2 years and on into the future. So thank you very much, all of you, for what you've done and what you're doing. I'm going to turn it back.